Hello everyone, welcome to Edukemy's content enrichment series. This is a supplement to your core essay writing course, and in this session, in the next 15-20 minutes, we'll deep dive into specific subject areas for your essay writing. Right? It's less about the structure of the essays, more about the subject matter. So today the topic we have chosen is social media and its impact on mental health, right? So we'll go deeper and see different dimensions of this topic. So the further ado, let me step into the topic. Let me share my screen here real quick. We will use PowerPoint today, and that will be our predominant medium. Okay, so now this topic, in terms of what the agenda is, where will we go today? What's our pathway today, right? We will go deeper into the topic, of course, right? We'll discuss examples, evidences of the arguments you want to put forth, so your essay becomes more rich. We'll organize our thoughts and summarizing, slightly different, right? Organizing is more finding different compartments within your brain to put your memories in, so you can easily make sense, you know where to find them. But summarizing is about converging onto a particular storyline. How do you weave together different components? So we'll take a look at both. And then finally reviewing our learning. So building blocks of our analysis topic for this topic, right? We'll discuss about the core mental health issues, discuss the spectrum of issues that there is, discuss the science and the facts, what's been the response so far by different groups, whether it is social media companies or governments or individuals and influencers, things like that. Then we'll put our thoughts together. This is a little bit of the synthesis that I talked about, the summarizing thoughts on the way forward. What are the big questions here? What is that we're trying to answer as part of the essay? And then eventually the conclusions with clear actions and responsibilities, right? Who should do what? So these are the broad 5 dimensions we'll cover. Let's start with the topic, the treatment of the topic. It's a fairly straightforward topic. It doesn't have too much of a balancing act or different perspectives. It's not like economy versus environment. It's not that difficult one from that perspective. But there can be some variations here, right? Let's talk about, instead of mental health, if somebody would have asked human psyche, mind, it kind of takes a different connotation. It talks about, now you can talk about kind of biases, prejudices, different perspective of thought, diversity of mental inputs. You can take it a different way, right? Instead of just mental health, which is focusing purely on how healthy is your mind. Or happiness, right? That could be a slightly different note also, but a lot of the foundational building blocks you can still use. Happiness is, of course, a broad topic. Or collective psyche. So think of mental health as an individual angle versus a collective, a social angle of what's the collective whole thinking. How are they getting impacted? Okay, so core psychological issues, the spectrum is pretty wide. It starts very simply with kind of the topic of addiction. We all know kind of these are stats that are well understood, researched, average of 2-3 hours a day. 20% of students, the youth, use it for over 5 hours a day. And the fact that this addiction is not just addictive substance, right? It's an engineered addiction. That means somebody is actively putting research dollars into engineering it, into creating this or heightening this addiction. Then bias, prejudice, and echo chamber. This is where it starts. This is where the mental impact kind of starts. So once you're addicted, you start getting into groups that have like-minded people, and there is polarization. So it's not like these things don't exist outside of social media, but social media heightens this. But this has an impact on how people feel. And starting to talk about the susceptibility to fake media, because it's an echo chamber. you start believing in what you hear. Then eventually it talks about kind of self-esteem, right? Self-esteem has two aspects, positive and negative self-esteem. Positive impact, a lot of people have documented that in social media, when you start projecting a better image of yourself, you start believing it. They call it fake it till you make it, right? So a lot of people you see, their on-screen personas are very different from their off, how they really are, right? So that's, sometimes it helps because it creates a positive self-belief, and sometimes it doesn't, right? It is a negative self-esteem. So this is all coming from altered perception of reality. And negative self-esteem happens when there is heightened expectations from life, and that doesn't become true, right? You see other people living great lives on social media, so you see, oh, my life is so uneventful and boring. And this eventually leads to a vicious cycle, because the lesser your self-esteem, the more likely you are to engage in self-propaganda. And if people don't like your self-propaganda, then you may further get more and more negative self-esteem. The exponential effect is there. So when you talk about self-esteem impact, why I highlighted these topics is, don't just say that yes, social media results in positive and negative self-esteem. That's half the point. The point is the contradiction. The point is the vicious nature of the cycle. Those kind of things will highlight that next level, right? Peel the onion a couple of layers, as they say. A lot of this eventually leads to fear of missing out, FOMO. You guys would have heard about this acronym, eventually causing anxiety, right? It's all about fear of missing out. Is I am not in the action, I'm not in the mainstream, I wasn't there, I'm missing out. All of that causes anxiety, eventually leading to depression and suicidal tendencies, further heightened by things like dark social, the kill fee culture. People, you might have heard horror stories about all of this that's happening on the internet. This is the extreme end of the spectrum. Now I'll leave you with 3 stickies here on the core issues. The stickies are kind of my way of pointing useful material. I saw this fantastic article on BBC recently covered about the dark social. Very, very insightful, with examples and a lot of reasoning, citation of psychological studies. Then the second one, obviously very, very recent. A lot of our celebrities said a lot of things. Take a listen to some of them. Theconversation.com, good site. It had a nice article about the problem of living inside echo chambers. Very insightful. I mean, the positive aspects, negative aspects, very balanced essay. You'll find a lot of stuff to embellish your essays with. Yeah. Now let's look at how might we summarize. I've given 2 examples. One, a journalistic narrative, which is it's a little bit dry, but it presents things as they are, right? Versus a dramatic, a little bit of a personal appeal kind of thing, where you're saying, if I, as an individual, get into social media, I may be exposed to so many harmful situations, and I may end up just being plain addicted, or might go all the way towards physical harm. So it's almost like um, a little bit of a persuasive appeal kind of tone to your writing. I personally don't like too dry kind of writing, but that's a matter of taste. Sometimes, it's also, you should have temper it based on the topic too. And what's the topic asking? Is the topic asking a narrative? Is a topic asking you to talk about solutions? But a little bit of passion is always helpful, right? Okay, science and facts. What's the science telling us? The first thing is it's a correlation. A lot of studies have established that there is a correlation between social media and disorders, not a causation, which is why World Health Organization doesn't establish this as a disorder. Dopamine and RPE, casino slot machines are classic examples of this reward prediction error. You all probably know about dopamine. That's the neurotransmitter that helps or that gets released when we have a successful social interaction. Somebody likes your page, you dopamine flows, right? So marketing folks are using this to dramatically improve the sort of appeal of a page or make it sticky. There's been a lot of research about whether it's universally good or bad, mindful use of technology. That's the third aspect. And everybody says the same thing, that in small measures, it's actually good. But this raises a key question. If the addiction is engineered, is there any such thing as free will? Can I really decide how much Facebook I watch every day? Is it even possible, right? Or is, if somebody's working, putting dollars of innovation money to heighten that pleasure for me? And then data marketplace, social media is not just connect and share. There's a lot of people that are actively selling, buying your data and using it to further their agenda. So that may be at the root of all of this, right? All of these business models are advertising based. So have to talk about this as a key piece. And then India, what about India, right? Niman study talked about how ill-equipped is India in terms of mental health itself. Now magnify it through social media. So how is India going to cope with it? So a couple of stickies again. Talked about the Niman study. This Harvard research is about the positive and negative social media. This groundbreaking documentary called The Great Hack is a fantastic piece of work that gets into the details of this data marketplace piece, right? So if you get a chance, watch it. You'll learn a lot of stuff. Okay, so here are a couple of, Shabir sir talks about nudge theories, right? So how do you nudge your essay to get to the next level? You can use these two, for example, right? Talk about free will. This is a bigger deal. This is not just, people watching some illegal content and going nuts, right? It's actually about free will impacting democratic society at some level. So it's not just individual mental health impact, but there's collective psyche impact. Some stats, right? So again, you'll find plenty of stats on the net. Focusing, zooming in on here, India, a lot of people use, 2 hours, 25 minutes on average, people spend time on social networks. You'll see some of the highest usage are countries that are developing nations. The developed nations are substantially less. And then the budget we talked about in the last slide, that India's budget is 0.05%, is abysmally low, right? Compared to some of the other countries, they're exponentially high. Even at 1%, compare that with 0.05%, that's pretty low. And then obviously India's hidden mental health problem. Okay, now let's get to summarize this area, right? So my hint is, don't get opinionated. This is a science section. So present facts as they are. So one way to do it is, just say science is well understood, very clear. Talk about technicalities of correlation, causation, dopamine, RP, etc. Then refer some scientific studies, documentaries. You can go a little bit and talk about broader issues like free will and democratic society, things like that, which is much broader, right? And then the India situation. This is one way to summarize it. There's a number of ways, but hopefully this gives you an idea. Okay, so let's see what's been the response so far, right? So you probably know a lot of this, but several tactical things have been done, like Instagram saying they'll hide likes in 2020. This is a recent one. Detection of Photoshop filtered photos. I mean, they want to promote real, genuine content. Facebook had this hate speech removal algorithm. Twitter does this fact checking. YouTube checks videos for illegal content. These are some of the responses. And then big one is Mark Zuckerberg's congressional hearings around platforms not being able to take ownership of content. It's a big, big issue, right? In my opinion, that's like not taking responsibility. So if opinions are being formed in this area, what is the limits of responsibility of people? Simon Sinek talks a lot about this in a video on YouTube. Very, very insightful video. Just search Simon Sinek, best speech ever that broke the internet. You'll see a lot of good insights there. And then how have governments reacted? Several governments are starting to play catch up. Japan has this internet fasting camps, for example. Indian government's pretty much limited to this IT Act of 2000, Information Technology Act. So I'll give you a few more information specifically for India. Check up this loc.gov article on government response to disinformation. It has a lot of details into the IT Act and different clauses within the IT Act and what that protects us from. Predominantly everything is on disinformation or fake, call it fake news or whatever, right? Very little on mental health, but study it, go into deeper, get deeper insights there. Election Commission, that's the other one I picked on. There is this whole concept of pre-certification of social media content for political ads, right? So, or political speeches, or political posts. They want to make sure that they don't, it's not just fake, and people not just indulging in propaganda. So it's been some things done, but obviously not enough, right? So how might we summarize? And this is the starting point where you can put your opinions forward. So I've done it this way. I've used words like lukewarm, Silicon Valley not yet standing up and taking responsibility, some governments doing some things, and then there have been scattered responses. I cite some example like Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook's hate speech removal algorithm. Then I'm finally forming an opinion, leading on to my thoughts for the way forward, right? So I'm saying whatever has happened in the past is clearly insufficient and shows complete lack of willingness, and we need a holistic strategy and some immediate action. So I'm consolidating what has happened in the past and how might we think about the future. And so thoughts on the way forward, this is all about like future, right? You are trying to be future centric, talking about at the core is really the topic, right? Long-term health and mental health and happiness. So we talk about building virtual experiences. We talk about optimizing how many friends, how many minutes, what we need to do, in terms of optimizing our exposure to social media. How do we differentiate between good and bad on social media? How much of social media is actually necessary for social fabric? Free speech, free will and democratic society, actions needed from government. The reason we wrote it like this is these are the bigger questions. And if you really want to treat the patient, you don't treat the symptoms. You have to go to the root causes. So we have gone a couple of layers below the mental issue. So how do I solve anxiety is a different question than how do I identify good versus real bad content on social media. So you've taken one level deeper, right? The problem behind the problem. You asked three whys. They say you ask three whys to get to the root cause, right? So why is that a problem? And why is that problem a problem, right? And then so on and so forth. So this is our way of building that. And now when you build that, when you also kind of embellish them with some additional sort of nudges, right? So when you talk about optimization, talk about Dunbar's number and social cohesion, this is a big deal. Talk about Google and Apple, what they have done. You talk about the multidimensional nature of this good and bad, right? So it could be good for adults, not good for teens. There can be, content might be okay, platform may be bad, platform might be okay, content might. So there are multiple dimensions here. And then free speech, free will, and democratic society. Right, that's a big one from a future dimension perspective. So this is talk about collective mental health here. And then your plan or actions need to be like a actionable thing, right? So it's actionable plan. How do you balance tactical versus strategic, long term versus short term, those kind of things. So these are things that will enhance the quality of your writing. So how might we summarize a solutions approach? So like we discussed, you emphasize the questions, you show a balanced, rational approach. Don't say, social media is all bad, right? So talk about, what the immense opportunities it is creating. So what's optimal, right? And then eventually create the lead on for the answer. It's a tough question, but, um, you know, don't just give the answer at the outset, right? So you had to create a little bit of underlining, emphasizing, and leading on, so that when the resolution finally comes, it has sense of closure, right? Just like a ending of a movie, right? It has to be some storyline, but it depends a lot. I say it with a pinch of salt because it depends a lot on the topic itself. So how might we conclude? Let's go look at the conclusion itself. These are the questions, right? We emphasize our questions in this slide here. What should be our uh, conclusions? So conclusions are all about reinforcements of everything you said so far and a call to action. So I've done it grouping individual, government, and social media giants. For individuals, I have fairly simple governments. I talk about balancing content takedown versus free speech, criminalization of illegal content, and having clear definition, media accreditations, journalistic controls on social media, having media literacy, media watchdog, citizen literacy stuff that helps them kind of make them conscious of the data they provide, and funding, things like that, right? And social media giants, again, talk about how they can be more clear about the data and how they use our data, how they can reduce dependency on advertising and invest more in, safeguarding against not promoting addiction, right? So those are some of my conclusions. How might I conclude? How might we write this down, summarize, right? So I've written about this is an example, right? So that this being a multi-layered problem of these different dimensions, social, political, corporate, technological, behavioral, all of these are present. And then I talk about um, parliaments or governments doing this, and social media companies doing this, and end with the individual perspective, because I wanted to make it personal, a little bit persuasive that way. So I have a personal touch at the end in terms of what this might mean for people, right? And talk about how our youth is immensely vulnerable, how it's an unpredictable, dangerous, and uncontrolled digital environment, and that our inaction and negligence can destroy the foundation of life. So this is a way to end. Um, I also, leave you with this nugget. This is a way a lot of corporates use to balance initiatives or prioritize initiatives. So you're writing about a bunch of these initiatives here. How might you prioritize them? What's the value versus complexity scale, right? Eventually, you come to this high value, low complexity. You do this first. So another way to conclude is to provide some level of prioritization. Let's do this first because this makes sense. It's takes less to do it, but we get more value. Things like that, right? So that's another way, maybe a much better way to conclude. But hopefully, all of that gave you a good sense of what this topic is about. Next time we'll bring in a new topic, and I will, talk through some similar aspects of different dimensions, how to treat each dimension, how to go into the details, peel the onion a couple of layers, bring out the real facts, the real questions behind the questions, and, embellish your essay with the right level of, richness and balance, right? So that said, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.